The first distress call arrived on a Tuesday. Dr. Sarah Chin was analyzing brain wave patterns in her lab at the Lunar Neurological Institute when the facility's AI interrupted her work. "Doctor, you're needed in Emergency Conference Room 1. Priority Alpha." Sarah saved her work with a gesture and hurried through the station's curved corridors. The room was already packed with colleagues when she arrived. Neurologists, cynobiologists, and military personnel all crowded around a holographic display showing a distant sector of space. Admiral James Rodriguez stood at the head of the table, his weathered face grave. 3 hours ago, we received this transmission from the Arcturus trading station. He nodded, and the recording began. The alien's features were avian, with iridescent feathers and 4 eyes. But what struck Sarah wasn't its appearance. It was the creature's obvious terror. "Please," it rasped in translated English. "Something is wrong with our minds. The thoughts, they're not ours anymore. The infection spreads through neural networks, through our shared consciousness. Dozens of worlds are already." The alien convulsed, its feathers bristling. "Humans, you're isolated, primitive. Your minds don't connect like ours. You might be immune. You might be our only." The transmission cut to static. "That was the last coherent message," Rodriguez said quietly. "Since then, we've detected hundreds of similar distress calls across 7 sectors. Whatever this is, it's spreading." Sarah leaned forward, studying the neural pattern readouts scrolling beside the main display. "These readings, they're unlike anything I've seen. The synaptic activity is completely chaotic, but there's a pattern to the chaos. Like someone rewrote their neural architecture. A psychic plague." Dr. Marcus Webb, their lead cynobiologist, sounded skeptical. "That's impossible. 2 centuries ago, we thought faster than light travel was impossible," Sarah countered. "We need to investigate. If we're truly immune because of our primitive neural structure." "It's too dangerous," Rodriguez interrupted. "We can't risk exposure." Sarah met his eyes. "With respect, Admiral, we can't risk doing nothing. Humanity just joined the Galactic Assembly last year. We're still proving ourselves as a spacefaring species. If we ignore this crisis, we could be signing our own death warrant by getting involved," Webb argued. "Or we could be signing the galaxy's death warrant by staying safe in our corner of space," Sarah shot back. She pulled up her research data. "Look at these comparative brain scans. Every other known species has evolved some form of technological or biological neural networking. Shared consciousness, hive minds, synthetic telepathy. But humans, we're different. Our brains actively resist external influence. What they see as a primitive limitation might be our greatest strength." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity, the newcomers, the primitives, might be the galaxy's only hope. Rodriguez studied the data for a long moment before straightening. "Dr. Chen, assemble a research team. The medical ship Nightingale is being prepped for launch. You'll rendezvous with any survivors you can find and gather data on this infection. But your priority is confirming human immunity. We can't help anyone if we're vulnerable ourselves." Sarah nodded, her mind already racing through the equipment she'd need. What about first contact protocols? The quarantine regulations? Emergency override? Rodriguez's expression was grim. "The assembly worlds are falling dark one by one. We're beyond protocols now." As the room emptied, Sarah lingered, studying the map of affected systems. The infection was spreading in a distinct pattern, like ripples in a pond. But ripples had to start somewhere. What was at the center? 48 hours later, the Nightingale broke lunar orbit. Sarah watched Earth recede through the observation deck's windows, a blue marble wrapped in the latticework of orbital stations and defense platforms. Humanity had worked so hard to join the galactic community, to prove we weren't the violent, chaotic species many feared us to be. Now our isolation, our primitive nature, might be the galaxy's salvation. The ship's first officer, David Kumar, joined her at the window. "Course is set for the Arcturus station. We should arrive in 3 days, assuming the quantum corridors are still stable. Sarah nodded. Her team had spent the launch preparation time studying every scrap of data they could gather about the infection. The pattern was consistent. Species with advanced neural networks fell first and fastest. The more connected they were, the more vulnerable. But there were anomalies that worried her. "Look at this," she said, pulling up a data stream. "The infection isn't just spreading through biological neural networks. It's affecting AI systems, quantum computers, even basic data networks. It's like it's alive," Kumar finished. "Or worse, like it's intelligent." Before Sarah could respond, the ship's eye chimed. "Dr. Chen, we're receiving a new transmission. Multiple sources, extreme distress." The message played through the observation deck's speakers, a chorus of voices in different languages, all translated in overlapping English. "The thoughts are wrong. Can't trust our own minds. It wants in. It wants. We want. We are. We." Sarah shivered as the voices merged into a single tone. Then silence. Whatever this plague was, they were running out of time to stop it. And somewhere out there, at the center of those ripples, waited answers they might not want to find. "Plot every transmission source," she ordered the AI. "Compare it against stellar cartography and known archaeological sites. This didn't come from nowhere. Something started it. And we need to find out what before there's no one left to save." The stars streaked past the window as the Nightingale accelerated to quantum speed. Humanity had always been proud of our independence, our individual minds. We saw it as strength, even as other species pitied our isolation. Now that strength would be tested against a threat that turned unity into weakness and connection into vulnerability. The price of salvation might be high, but the cost of failure would be higher. Sarah touched the window's cold surface, watching the quantum wake ripple through space. "We're coming," she whispered to the silent stars. "Hold on." The Nightingale's quantum engines pulsed rhythmically as Sarah studied the neural scans from their first rescued vessel. The Mirith refugee ship had been adrift when they found it, its crew barely coherent. But within hours of exposure to human presence, the survivors began to stabilize. "It doesn't make sense," Dr. Webb muttered, comparing readings. "Our mere presence shouldn't have this effect. We're not doing anything." "Maybe that's exactly what we're doing," Sarah replied, enlarging a holographic brain scan. "Nothing. No neural broadcasting. No quantum consciousness. No synthetic telepathy. We're like dead zones in their network." The ship's medical bay was crowded with survivors, avian Kirtel, crystalline Mirith, even a few Volov, with their distinctive bioluminescent patterns, all species that normally maintained constant neural links with their kind. All now huddled near the human medical staff, as if seeking shelter from a storm. Lieutenant Kumar entered with fresh data readings. 2 more distress calls. But something's different. These aren't panic signals anymore. They're coordinated. Sarah felt a chill. "Show me." The transmissions played in sequence. Different species, different sectors, but the same message repeated with precise timing. "The network expands. Resistance is isolation. Join the unity. It's evolving," Webb whispered. "Whatever this is, it's not just destroying their neural networks anymore. It's using them." A sharp cry from one of the Mirith patients interrupted them. The crystalline being's facets were pulsing with distressed colors. "They're calling," it sang in its musical language. "The voices, they want us to rejoin the network, want us to come home." Sarah rushed to the alien's side, noting how its agitation decreased with proximity to her. "You're safe here. We'll figure this out." "You don't understand," the Mirith chimed sadly. "We've always been connected. Since our species first evolved, we've shared our thoughts, our memories, our very essence. This isolation, it's like being blind, being dead." Kumar checked the ship's sensors. "Doctor, the quantum corridor readings are becoming erratic. Something's affecting the network." Sarah's mind raced. The infection wasn't just spreading through neural networks, it was spreading through the very quantum corridors that made interstellar travel possible. The same technology that united the galaxy was now being turned against it. "We need to understand why we're immune," she said firmly. "Not just the biological mechanics, but the evolutionary reason. Our primitive brains didn't happen by accident." Webb pulled up humanity's evolutionary data. "Look at this. Early in our development, there were multiple hominid species. Some studies suggested they had limited telepathic abilities. But they died out," Sarah finished, "while our branch of humanity, the ones with the strongest neural barriers, survived. What if we faced something like this before?" The ship's AI interrupted. "Dr. Chen, we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Rodriguez. Priority 1. The Admiral's hologram appeared, his expression grim. "The infection has reached the core worlds. The assembly is falling apart, but we found something. Ancient records, buried in restricted archives. This isn't the first time this has happened." Sarah leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "The last outbreak was over 300,000 years ago. Most records were lost. But one thing is clear. Earth was quarantined back then. Not to protect other species from us. To protect us from this." Sarah breathed. "We're not primitive. We're survivors." The Mirith patient chimed softly. "The old stories. They speak of a time of silence, when the networks fell quiet to save the songs." Kumar checked the quantum readings again. "The corridors are degrading. If we're going to find answers, we need to move fast." Sarah looked at her patients, these beings who had evolved to share everything, now forced into mental solitude. Humanity had been called primitive, violent, chaotic, but we had also survived. Our independence, our mental barriers, our very isolation had been forged in an ancient crucible. "Plot a course to the nearest quarantine archive," she ordered. "We need to know what our ancestors knew, and we need to know what they did to stop this the first time." As the Nightingale changed course, Sarah watched her patients. Some were beginning to adapt to the silence, finding strength in their individuality. Others still huddled close to the human crew, seeking the strange peace our presence provided. The burden of hope was heavy, but humanity had carried it before, even if we didn't remember. "We evolved to survive this," she told her team. "Now we need to evolve to fight it." The ship accelerated through the degrading quantum corridors, racing against time and an enemy that turned unity into a weapon. Behind them, the infection spread. Ahead lay answers buried in humanity's forgotten past, and somewhere, in the silence between thoughts, waited salvation or extinction. The quarantine archive hung in space like a forgotten monument, a massive structure of black metal and crystalline data cores orbiting a dying star. As the Nightingale approached, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched by ghosts of the past. "Structural analysis complete," the ship's AI announced. "The archive predates all known galactic civilizations. Materials and construction methods are unknown." Kumar guided their ship into a docking position. "Power signatures are minimal, but there's still something running in there." After all this time, the rescue mission had become a race against time. In the week since they'd left Earth, 30 more systems had gone silent. The infection wasn't just spreading, it was accelerating, learning, adapting. And the messages from infected worlds had changed from pleas for help to something far more chilling. "Join the unity. Embrace the network. We are one." Sarah checked her environmental suit's seals. The archive's atmosphere had long since vented, but its data cores might hold the key to humanity's forgotten past. Webb and 2 security officers would accompany her inside. "Remember," she told her team as they entered the airlock, "we're looking for any reference to Earth's quarantine or the previous outbreak. Our ancestors knew how to fight this. We need to remember." The archive's corridors were vast and empty, designed for beings far larger than humans. Their helmet lights revealed strange symbols etched into the walls, mathematical sequences that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. "Over here," Webb called out, his light illuminating a massive door. "These markings, they're similar to early human cave paintings. But that's impossible. They'd have to be hundreds of thousands of years old," Sarah finished, "just like the last outbreak." She approached the door, studying the primitive symbols. "These aren't just paintings. They're warnings." The security officers set up portable power units, and Sarah connected her tablet to the Archive's ancient systems. At first, nothing happened. Then the walls began to hum with awakening power, and streams of data poured into their computers. "This is..." Webb's voice trailed off as he stared at the translations. "Sarah, you need to see this." The data told a story that rewrote everything they thought they knew about human history. 300,000 years ago, humanity wasn't a primitive species. We were part of an advanced civilization that spanned the galaxy. Like all advanced species, we had evolved neural networks, shared consciousness, technological telepathy. We were connected. We were vulnerable. "The infection," Sarah read aloud, "wasn't random. It was a weapon. Created by something that came from outside the galaxy. Something that saw our unity as an opportunity." Kumar's voice crackled over their comms. "Doctor, we're picking up multiple quantum signatures approaching the archive. Ships. Lots of them." Sarah kept reading, her heart pounding. "Our ancestors found a way to fight back. They had to devolve, to deliberately destroy their neural networks and rebuild their minds to resist external influence. They quarantined Earth not to protect others, but to give humanity time to change." "But why didn't they leave records?" Webb asked. "Why make us forget?" The answer appeared in the next data stream, and Sarah felt her blood run cold. "Because they knew it would return. And the only way to ensure our immunity was to evolve it naturally, without knowing why. The quarantine wasn't just physical. It was a memory wipe, a fresh start." The Archive's systems suddenly pulsed with new energy, and a holographic message appeared, a recording left by their ancestors. The figure was humanoid but different, its brain case larger, its eyes adapted to different wavelengths of light. But when it spoke, Sarah recognized the determination in its voice. "If you're seeing this, it means the enemy has returned. We sacrificed everything. Our technology, our unity, our very identity, to give you a chance. Your minds are your shields. Your individuality is your strength. The enemy turns unity against itself, but it cannot comprehend true independence. That is humanity's gift to the future, the power to stand alone." The message ended as Kumar's voice cut in urgently. "Doctor, multiple ships dropping out of quantum space. Their signatures match infected vessels. We need to leave. Now." Sarah quickly copied the remaining data. The archive had served its purpose. It had shown them the truth. Humanity wasn't born primitive. We had chosen isolation as the price of survival. Now that same choice might save the galaxy. As they rushed back to the Nightingale, Sarah's mind raced with implications. The infection wasn't just a plague. It was a tool of invasion, turning the galaxy's neural networks into a weapon. But humanity had found a way to fight it before. We could do it again. The archive grew smaller in their view screen as they fled, its ancient walls holding memories of a sacrifice made to save the future. A sacrifice that had worked better than their ancestors could have hoped. Because this time, humanity wasn't facing the enemy alone. "Plot a course back to Earth," Sarah ordered. "We know what we're fighting now, and we know how to win." The Nightingale accelerated away from the archive, just as the infected ships arrived, a swarm of vessels moving with eerie coordination. But Sarah wasn't afraid anymore. They had found more than just answers in the archive. They had found hope. The Nightingale's medical bay had become a testament to both hope and desperation. Sarah moved between her patients, noting how those closest to human crew members showed the strongest signs of recovery. Their minds, once drowning in the infected network, were learning to function independently again. Neural patterns stabilizing. She recorded, studying a Kirtel engineer whose feathers had regained their iridescent sheen. Subject shows increased resistance to network influence after 72 hours of human proximity. But time was running out. The infection had reached the Assembly's capital worlds, and the messages from infected systems had changed again. They weren't just calling for unity anymore. They were preparing for war. Dr. Chen. Kumar's voice rang through the ship's comms. Emergency transmission from Earth Defense Command. The holographic display showed chaos. Admiral Rodriguez looked exhausted, his uniform disheveled. The infected fleets are mobilizing. They're not just spreading the infection anymore. They're attacking any worlds that resist, and they're specifically targeting Earth. Sarah shared a look with Webb. They know we're the threat, the one species they can't infect. Worse, Rodriguez continued. We've detected quantum disturbances at the edge of the galaxy. Something's coming. Something big. The archive data you sent confirms our worst fears. This isn't just an infection. It's an invasion prep. The Mirith patient chimed softly from nearby. The silence between thoughts. That's where they hide. Where they wait. Sarah turned to the crystalline being. What do you mean? In the network, when minds touch, there are spaces between. Empty places, but they're not empty anymore. They're occupied. Webb's eyes widened as he checked his readings. The quantum corridors. They're not just degrading. They're being repurposed. The infection isn't destroying neural networks. It's rebuilding them into a door, Sarah finished. The enemy isn't just coming. We're being turned into a welcome mat. The ship shuddered as it pushed through increasingly unstable quantum space. Earth's defense fleet was mobilizing. But how do you fight an enemy that turns your allies' minds against you? That uses entire civilizations as weapons. Then Sarah noticed something in her patient data, a pattern she'd missed before. Look at this. The recovered patients, they're not just resisting the network. They're learning from us. Their brains are actually restructuring, developing natural barriers like ours. Evolution in action. Webb breathed. But it would take generations to, unless we help it along. Sarah pulled up the archive data. Our ancestors didn't just destroy their neural networks. They engineered a biological reset, a way to rebuild minds from the ground up. Kumar frowned. You're talking about deliberately devolving entire species. I'm talking about giving them a choice, Sarah corrected. The same choice our ancestors made. Connection or survival. Doctor, the ship's AI interrupted. Quantum corridor destabilization has reached critical levels. We have perhaps 48 hours before interstellar travel becomes impossible. Sarah straightened. Get me Earth Defense Command. I know how we can fight back. The plan was audacious, arguably insane. Use Earth's quantum communication network to broadcast the engineered devolution sequence. Give every species a chance to choose humanity's path. Not everyone would take it. Many would choose extinction over losing their neural connections. But those who did choose would become like humanity. Immune, independent, free. The enemy weapon was brilliant, Sarah explained to the Emergency Council. It used our greatest strength, our unity, against us. But humanity proved there's another kind of strength, the strength to stand alone, to be truly individual. We can share that strength. As the Nightingale raced toward Earth, the first waves of infected ships began their assault. The defense fleet engaged them. But it was like fighting puppets. Behind every infected ship were the minds of countless enslaved beings, all moving in perfect, terrible unity. The broadcast is ready, Webb reported. But Sarah, even if this works, we're asking these species to give up everything they are, their entire way of life. Sarah watched Earth grow larger in their view screen, its orbital defenses glowing as they prepared for battle. No, she said softly. We're offering them a chance to become something new, something stronger. The enemy's true form was emerging from the galactic edge. Vast ships of impossible geometries, drawn by the beacon of billions of enslaved minds. But humanity remembered, Even if we didn't know we remembered. We had faced this enemy before, and we had chosen a harder path to defeat it. Now it was time to share that choice with the galaxy. Earth's orbital platforms blazed with defensive fire as the infected fleet descended upon the solar system. Sarah watched from the Nightingale's bridge as humanity's home made its stand, not just for survival, but for the right of every species to choose its own path. Broadcast ready, Webb announced, his fingers hovering over the controls. The devolution sequence will transmit through every quantum corridor simultaneously. Anyone connected to the network will receive it. Admiral Rodriguez's hologram flickered as enemy fire disrupted communications. The outer defense line is holding, but not for long. These ships, they're moving like a single organism. Through the view screen, Sarah watched the infected fleet's movements. Thousands of ships flowing like a river of metal and light, guided by billions of enslaved minds. Behind them, at the edge of sensor range, the true enemy waited. Vast shadow ships that defied physics, drawn by the beacon of conquered consciousness. They're here to harvest us, Sarah realized. To use our unity, our connection, as a bridge into our galaxy. The infection was just preparation. The Mirith patient chimed from its medical pod. Then we must choose silence. Choose solitude. Choose humanity. A direct hit rocked the Nightingale. Shields at 60%, Kumar reported. We're getting readings from the enemy ships. The neural patterns. They're synchronized. All of them. Trillions of minds beating as one. Sarah took a deep breath. Send the broadcast. The devolution sequence launched, riding the very quantum networks the enemy had corrupted. It reached across space like a wave of silence, offering every connected mind a choice. Remain part of the network and fall to the enemy, or follow humanity's path into conscious isolation. The effect was immediate and devastating. Infected ships began to drift as their crews' neural networks collapsed. Some recovered, their pilots choosing independence. Others went dark forever, their inhabitants unable to survive without their precious connection. Energy spike. Kumar shouted. The shadow ships are moving. The enemy vessels accelerated toward Earth, their impossible geometries twisting space itself. But as they approached, something unexpected happened. The unified consciousness they had hoped to harvest was fragmenting, splintering into billions of individual minds. They can't comprehend it, Sarah whispered. True independence, it's alien to them. They evolved to prey on connected consciousness, but faced with genuine individuality. The shadow ships faltered, their attack patterns becoming erratic. Without a unified network to infiltrate, they were blind, confused. Humanity's fleet struck back, joined by ships whose crews had chosen independence. The battle became chaos, but chaos was humanity's natural element. Hours later, Sarah stood in the Nightingale's observation deck, watching the cleanup begin. The shadow ships had retreated, their harvest denied. But the cost had been enormous. Many species had chosen extinction over losing their neural connection. Others were struggling to adapt to their new isolation. Their civilizations fundamentally changed. Was it worth it? Webb asked quietly, joining her at the window. Before Sarah could answer, a transmission came through, not from a unified network, but from thousands of individual vessels, each choosing to broadcast the same message in their own way, in their own time. We choose to be alone together. We choose humanity's path. Admiral Rodriguez's hologram appeared. Dr. Chen, the assembly. What's left of it? They're calling for Earth to take a leadership role, to help guide species through this transition. Sarah watched as ships of various species moved through space, each now piloted by truly independent minds. Our ancestors chose isolation to protect the future, she said. We chose to share that protection, even knowing the cost. That's the real strength of humanity. Not just our ability to stand alone, but our willingness to help others find their own way to stand. The Mirith's chimes had changed, becoming more complex, more individual. The silence between thoughts, it's not empty anymore. It's filled with possibility. Sarah nodded. The galaxy would never be the same. The great neural networks were gone, and with them much of what these species had been. But in their place was something new. A community of truly independent beings, choosing to work together not because they were forced to by biology or technology, but because they wanted to. "Send a message to all ships," she ordered. "Tell them, welcome to independence. Welcome to humanity's path." The silence may feel empty now, but that emptiness, that's where we learn to be truly ourselves. The stars seemed brighter somehow, each one distinct, each one alone, yet all part of the same grand pattern, just like the minds that now looked upon them with truly individual eyes for the first time in eons. The price of salvation had been paid, the choice had been made, and the galaxy would remember that when unity became a weakness, it was humanity's solitude that showed the way forward. Unity, after all, means more when it's a choice.